One. All right. What's up, everyone? Thanks again for another episode of the Sunny Ray Show. We talk about AI, robotics, and a bunch of other fun topics. Today, I'm joined by James. James, how you doing today?
Doing great.
Great. So James is the director of compassionate sustainability at Stanford University, the School of Medicine. He's also a founder of Stanford spinoff called Regen Villages, and a Village OS software. So I am very intrigued by that as well. And so we're gonna dive into that topic in a bit. But I love to start kind of like with your background before you even got into AI, before you got into all this fun stuff, maybe even before Stanford. Where does your origin kind of story look like, James?
Hey, I'm born and raised New Yorker, so I still have that, in my blood. And did my undergrad at New York University, combination of computer science and media technology back then, the precursor for video games and special effects software. I then moved out to Northern California, uh, and started a video game company, a software company. We were doing a lot of work with, at the time, with George Lucas, with Industrial Light and Magic, Star Wars fame, and doing special effects software for motion pictures, but also game design, cartridge games. I'm the kind of OG, Nintendo, Sega, Atari cartridge game kind of person, then to CD-ROMs. But something important happened to me when I was north of San Francisco in a semi-rural area called Marin County, where I started to really learn about nature. Coming from New York City, I was a little not as exposed to these natural environments, but basically started to befriend these local small plot family farmers and was invited to these beautiful farm to table meals. And I just fell into this beautiful rabbit hole that took me 16 years of case study research of eco villages, intentional communities, where people were living sustainably and resiliently in their own footprint. So basically, their housing, where their food was coming from, their water, their energy, these eco villages were really inspiring. So fast forward, I came to Stanford about 14 years ago, and with a primary thesis of could we create a software relationship to the natural world? Could we understand the dialogue, the rhythms of nature in terms of how we could design these self-sustaining communities and then operate them using sensing, robotics, and things like that. So that's a snapshot. And then in 2016, we founded a Dutch holding company, which is a Stanford spinoff called Regen Villages. And we've been ever since focusing on this stack called the Village OS, open source software for making the world a better place.
Have you ever heard of a guy named Jack Fresco?
Sure.
Yeah, I just remember coming across some of his work a long time ago, and he just had this vision that I don't know popped into my mind. Perhaps directionally not accurate in some ways, but he did have this vision of, essentially operating systems and robots running our world, leading to abundance, post-scarcity, etc. Just curious, like where did the inspiration, like was it literally just your 16 years of work that kind of brought you to this, or was there a book or a group of friends or
Well,
someone
yeah,
that
so no, it's a really great question, and what it comes down to is, we stand on some great shoulders. For instance, Rudolf Steiner, was a turn of the century, 20th century thinker about sort of whole system circularity for farming and for nature and for education and things like this. Buckminster Fuller, our Bucky Fuller, on sort of generalist design thinking and logical infrastructure based on natural resource flows. That's a key thing for us. Other folks like Bill Mollison, the sort of pillar of what's called permaculture design. How do you look at land and have it speak, to you about what it wants, what it's capable of? And so these are the informative structures that led me to be inspired to think that we could have, we could accelerate things to build these kind of communities faster.
Okay, can you maybe take us to like the final frontier, the vision here? So when all this really comes to fruition, 10 years, 100 years? What kind of time span you guys thinking about here? But what does a day look like? I wake up in the morning and how does it feel?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it really is beautiful. It's this whole idea that you wake up in first of all a dignified, passive home, which is producing more energy than you and your family need. So it's a surplus producer of power. And it's a comfortable house, but you walk out into this community which is designed around natural resource flow. So basically, it's producing its own food, clean water, renewable energy, digesting waste into resources. But as you walk through the community, early in the morning, you can smell the fresh bread being baked and the coffee brewing and the cafe life starting to happen. There are these really important farm to table moments, right? About disarming this whole idea of being stressed all the time and finding those solutions, which are actually pretty simple. So my research parallels what are called blue zones around the world, where people are living, let's say, past 110 years old, never seeing doctor, never taking pharmaceuticals. What's going on? They're living actually in communities that have all of that kind of resources in support of their thriving.
And what are those things that these blue zones have that maybe the rest of us are missing? Is it sunlight? Is it exercise? Is
It's,
it I don't
it's
know. What is it?
let's start
Healthy
with it
food?
with first and foremost, soil health. So with healthy soil, when you have the right kind of regenerative systems, animals, they're aerating the soil, they're fertilizing the soil. There's this kind of design thinking with cover crops, and in other words, we're not using interventions, chemical interventions for producing food. That all of a sudden people are engaged. There's access and agency. They have soil microbes under their fingernails because maybe they've been gardening or farming a little bit. They're cooking. They're using the food that they feel proud about. But most importantly, they're in these multi-generational communities where you're not a pariah because you have a baby, and you're not garbage because you've reached a certain age and you're no longer quote unquote, viable per se. In the old days, the elders were the wisdom seek, holders of the communities. So we see that all of that is kind of packaged up in how people live healthier, happier lives. That's what the blue zones have really proven.
And is the idea to kind of take what's worked in these spaces and to help bring them to other places? But then there's also this kind of like AI robotics twist to it. So maybe take us into that side of
Yeah,
it as well.
so exactly. So because I come from, technology background, married now with, years of sort of nature background, the thought process really is that we use these systems and services to our benefit, to human and planetary health, right? So in other words, we can look at Gen AI software, generative AI software, to help rapidly look at designing land in such a way that it respects the open space and the conserved value of those natural resources. And then it suggests the right kind of housing development that can go on that land in relationship to self-sustainable infrastructure, right? And then once the neighborhood is sort of being designed and built, we map what's called edge AI, right? It's tiny sensors. It creates neighborhood scale intelligence. It's about resiliency, right? Because the cloud and big data centers, these are very brittle infrastructure components. But if we can think about low energy, energy efficient AI, triggering the right kind of robotics that are there in service to mitigate risk, improve, our situation, model for future things that can happen, that all of a sudden AI is in our service. We're not in service to it. It's not dominating our power supply, taking away our water, creating all these crazy emissions. Instead, what we're suggesting are that these neighborhoods, each one of them gets built in a network around the world, regionally speaking, they reduce risk, they improve health, they lower burdens on government, on insurance, on brokering peaceful, happier places. So we look at AI through this lens of compassion. And I'm at the Center for Compassion, Altruism, Research and Education at Stanford University in the School of Medicine. And this is a lovely place to really imagine a better world with AI and robotics that is really about flourishing and thriving. That's really the kernel of it.
And what is the main narrative missing right now? I mean, because it feels devoid of compassion. There's a tremendous amount of fear and the potential for job loss, let alone Terminator 2. But rarely are you hearing people speak about like this type of vision, right? Where you can actually live in harmony and enhance our lives, where maybe AI is not in our face every day, but it's kind of almost in the background helping us live our best lives. But yeah, I mean, what's everyone missing right now?
I think, the it's a current economic scenario, which has been leading up now for the last few hundred years. It's kind of coming to a transition point. And and so we need to collectively think about how we want to be in control of AI, how we as the populace want to be the stewards of robotic interventions that are again in support of our health and our well-being and our thriving. And I think that's the model that's going to emerge, and we're promoting that model. We're promoting that actually that each one of these communities, as I've said, that gets realized around the world, actually contributes to local regional food security, water security, energy security. So, in other words, it eventually creates nation state security, especially in these sort of incredibly insecure times. So, it is, in a way, it's kind of a new asset class around risk avoidance and risk mitigation. And so, we're really looking at, again, trying to create this new economic model that makes the old model obsolete, which was kind of a quote from Bucky Fuller,
Have
modified.
you heard of this idea of network states? Is this at all in that kind of parallel universe, or are we talking about something totally different?
No, it's really what it comes down to is there should be some harmonizing for the different philosophies and what works best for each region, for each locality, for each national government. Uh, but at the heart of it, we can't lose sight of why we're here on Earth in the first place, and that's because of healthy soil. And it's because it's been able to sustain our life. And when we deplete that, then there are all this conflict around resources. But if we can rejuvenate and regenerate place, like let's say you go to rural India, sub-Saharan Africa, across ASEAN, and we really start to dot the landscape, especially the rural areas, where people have left, they go to these mega cities, they're living in these rings of poverty, because they can't find place either where they came from those villages or now in those urban settings. But if we can establish or reestablish the nature first that can welcome those people back, stem climate migration, we actually have a fighting chance for the next several thousand years, whatever it is on Earth or longer, to live, in balance with nature.
How does one encode empathy into an AI's objective function?
That's a really great question, and really what it comes down to is our lens really is on sustainability and resilience. The compassion comes through action, right? That when you spur the circumstances for healthier lifestyle, that people feel safer, It lowers amygdala response. It reduces cortisol release. These are all, of course, metrics of bad health and aging. If you can, of course, you can reduce those. You can improve longevity, happy longevity. And so, yeah, these are the mechanisms we think to inject into AI models.
And is that being considered by some of these? I mean, wasn't Google born at Stanford?
Google was born at Stanford,
Yeah. So I'm just
and
curious,
it's
like these behemoths, these big AI companies, right? Are they taking this seriously enough, do you think, or do we have a long way to go? I know Hinton, Dr. Hinton is not super optimistic right now, and he's, out there trying to warn people about some of the dangers. But where do you stand on that spectrum?
my feeling is that we must focus on how we can implement AI, machine learning, sensing, and robotics for the benefit of the populace. Meaning, what can we do at the local neighborhood scale for neighborhood intelligence? What's called federated learning, which is very low energy kind of sensing, but it actually, in the aggregate, creates a repository, if you will, of really helpful information for communities, right? And then each of those healthy communities is starting to overproduce public goodwill, a surplus, if you will, of healthy food, clean water, clean energy. They're therefore contributing to the regional health of areas, which also then reduce huge burdens at the national level. And so we're really talking about this idea of, how can we create a method for funding as many of these communities as we possibly can around the world. I'll give you an example. OpenAI by itself, in the next 3 years or so, will spend 3 trillion US dollars on building
Wow.
data centers.
Okay.
All right. Now, what is a data center? It is an industrial complex. It requires, gigawatts of power, hundreds of thousands or even millions of gallons of water. And it also creates emissions. And when, what we're really suggesting is 0.1% of that, which would be 3 billion US dollars, to invest in this kind of solution, which would be creating a network of these neighborhoods around the world at scale, especially in the global south, where we can leapfrog the rules, regulations, you know, that are put in place, kind of from an archaic perspective, but because we know how to make these neighborhoods really function, that this gets to be the new policy sort of going forward. So this is really what we're trying to aim at uh, is not to attack, let's say, big data or big data centers, but instead to say we need a balance. We need to create these as a hedge, really, that these neighborhoods are going to be actually the ones leading the way in the future. Each neighborhood is going to be net contributors to regional security, to national security, which is different thinking than just putting up as many giant data centers as you possibly can, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So for this next part, I wanted to ask you about robotics as a bridge and not a barrier. And many visions of, robotics, we often use it to distance humans from drudgery. But in your model, you talk about autonomous systems like, precision weeding and water management and ways of actually deepening our connection, with the world around us. So can you talk a little bit about how we go about making that happen?
Yeah, so the first part from our perspective with the Village OS open source platform is the generative design, as I mentioned, of these beautiful flourishing communities. And then the other part would be mapping what's called an edge AI, tiny ML, small language model, sensor network, which would then give sort of the instruction set to these robotics. I'll mention we've just started a working collaboration with another open source platform from a group called Nurture Robotics, which is the former head of robotics research from Dyson in the UK. And they have this wonderful plan for what's called SAMI, which is this self-assembling, robot system, which can essentially assemble itself based on the task at hand that's needed. So it sounds a bit like Star Trek, but within the next 5 to 10 years, these systems and services will become much more available around the world and much lower cost. So their goal really is super low cost robotic assistance that is self-assembling for, let's say, the task at hand. And that was really married then to what our work is with the Village OS software for understanding, the full stack of the neighborhood needs and the community needs. So this is where we see this, again, this sort of, it's not technology in your face. It's this whole idea that you have the circumstances for healthy living where those systems and services are there in support of that. It's a means to an end, right? And so I think that's really what we're focusing on. And so yeah, I think that there's a bright future for all different kinds of sizes and shaped robots, from the small actuators, as you mentioned, looking out into the farmland and water purification and other kinds of things, to the multi-armed, whatever, humanoid style robot, and other kinds of smart mobility solutions, et cetera. So, but the key for us is it has to be in service to human and planetary health. Those are our objectives.
I love it. So we've got a few minutes left here. I wanted to close on this one idea, which was super fascinating. You talk about healing the amygdala. You touched on it a little bit earlier in our conversation, but healing the amygdala through infrastructure. You mentioned that, modern cities are brittle. They trigger cortisol, releasing stress. I've done a lot of just personal work on trying to reduce stress through exercise and diet and sleep and things of that sort. But I mean, yeah, your surroundings obviously play a massive part in that. So how do you envision these new villages, these cities where we're not constantly triggering our cortisol levels?
Well, so, just so people understand that amygdala response is the fight or flight hormone, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
essentially, in our ancestry, when we saw a tiger, amygdala response was triggered naturally, to give us the adrenaline and the cortisol release to rapidly exit the situation, or to fight, right? To fight or flight, right? That's basically the context. Nowadays, when you're in the traffic jam, you're automatically getting amygdala response. There's no tiger. It's all manufactured stress, or the bills come in, or something else happens. There are these triggers, and they really do add up to degrade our well-being, mentally, physically, and that's one of the key things. We look at neighborhood, farm-to-table community infrastructure, which is really just pleasant, relaxing, enjoyable. You feel like you really fit in to the natural world. We have never been more disassociated from our place in nature than we are now. But imagine where you can sort of drop into a place where you can walk these long paths that are farm, edible, bikeable, communities, that you're meeting people along the way in prams or in walkers, that you're having these beautiful conversations, you're reconnecting with each other, with family, with friends, with community. These are not challenging things, right? They're not really difficult. It's just setting the circumstances for this. That is the infrastructure: food, water, energy, waste to resource management, passive home typologies, smart mobility solutions. All we're saying is integrate that, bring it in at a reasonable cost structure for both social, affordable market rate. And at that point, all of a sudden, the community itself, the neighborhood itself is exuding compassionate sustainability, and it's reducing automatically those responses which are causing this ill health. That's completely our philosophy.
I love it. I love it. James, where can people learn more about this project? Where can they learn more about yourself? Do you blog?
Sure. See care at Stanford University. So see care in the School of Medicine, um, and that stands for the Center for Compassion, Altruism, Research, and Education. And then regenvillages.com and the Village OS software, which is an open source platform, which is born from Stanford and Stanford Research, and with a lot of other beautiful partners like Nurture Robotics, as I mentioned. We also now are starting to work with a great company called Corium on simulation modeling. So there's a lot of really interesting things coming together to feed this beautiful open source platform, again, for the benefit of generations to come, our hope.
I love it. Okay, James, maybe just hang out for a minute. I'm going to bring this one to a close. Thank you all for listening. Really appreciate it. And very refreshing worldview, James, that you carry. So thank you for your time.